What's going on, everybody? Today we are going to talk about why these colors work in muddy water. So as you guys can see, we have pretty much every color you guys can think of. We have orange, red, pink, blue, yellow, green, you name it, we have it. But why does it work for bass fishing? So essentially why these colors work in muddy water is that they are contrasting colors. So basically that just means that in low light, darker situations that these colors are a lot easier to see for the bass. And talking about bass vision, let's talk about their eyes. To break this down in simpler terms, we're going to talk about bass eyes and what they are composed of, which are rods and cones. Rods are for lighting. You have low light, you have bright light. That just helps them see in certain lighting situations. And secondly, cones. Cones are what color they see. It's how their eyes perceive color. And there's actually studies done by this from everywhere from like the 1930s to even current day. They've done studies to where they can see bass react to certain colors better. And these studies have shown that the color red that we use very often, especially during pre-spawn situations, is 80% more likely to get struck by a bass than any other color. Secondly are greens, which is very close at 75%. And next we actually have black and blue, which are very close together as well, with blue being 48% and black being 40%. And lastly, you have your whites and chartreuse, which come very close at a 33% for white and 30% for chartreuse. Along with their vision, they use their lateral line. Now, what is a lateral line? A lateral line is actually their entire hearing and feeling sensation. Like they actually hear with it as well as feel with it. The problem with their lateral line is they don't really feel stuff until it gets kind of close, like that 15 to 20 foot range, but they can actually hear very far away. They can hear 50 feet out there, and they can actually identify fairly easily at a good distance the rattles and the hooks and stuff like that. They can actually tell what it kind of is. But once you get to that closer range, that's when they can actually feel the action of the lure, the thumping of the spinnerbait blades, the wobbling of the crankbait. That's when they can actually feel it, is when they get within that 15 to 20 foot range. And bass actually hear at certain frequencies. Everything else in nature has its own frequency, in the water column I should say. Shad have their own frequency, these lures have their own frequency, so that bass is actually able to identify which is different. So it's actually kind of crazy to me that bass can tell the difference between an artificial and a natural lure at a distance. This is why a big Colorado bladed spinnerbait does so well in muddy water, because the bass can actually feel it. And you combine that with a bright color like white and chartreuse that they can actually see in that water, being a contrasting color, your odds of catching that fish are much better. And this is also why a rock crawler would outperform, let's say, a flat-sided crankbait in that muddy water. And that's because that rock crawler is down there hunting, has a wide wobble action, as a flat-sided crankbait has a tight wiggle and it's not really bouncing around as much. Those bass can feel that rock crawler much better than they can the flat-sided crankbait. So with all this being said, I'm going to give you guys a breakdown on the 3 best lures you guys can use to catch fish in that muddy water. Now this can actually be used from wintertime, spring, fall, just whenever it gets really muddy. Now with what we were saying about what bass can see and using our contrasting colors, we are going to start off with a black and blue jig. Now the places that I want to use this jig is particularly on rocky banks that have laydowns or some sort of cover, because when the water's muddy, those bass, they want to get tight to cover because they can't see. You know, if you turn the lights off in a dark room, the first thing you're going to do is put your hand on the wall so you know where you're at and use that wall to guide yourself. Essentially the same thing for bass. So they're going to stay tight to that cover, and they're going to either get in those rocks or those laydowns or those dock posts or whatever it is. So that is my number 1 lure for muddy water. Number 2 is a crankbait. In particular, this rock crawler in the, I think it's called, it's like a red robin or something like that. It's a red with an orange belly, very bright contrasting color, and essentially I'm going to use this on rocky banks, 45-degree banks, transition areas. I mean, obviously it's in its name, rock crawler. You want to be hitting those rocks, getting in those rocks, banging around, making all kinds of noise, vibrations with that bright color. That way those bass can see that. And lastly, we're saving the best for last here because it's kind of have a 1-2 punch to it, is a white and chartreuse spinnerbait. You get that bonus from the colors, but also it has to be a Colorado bladed spinnerbait with that orange kicker. That orange kicker I feel like helps out tremendous in muddy water. The thump and the vibration from that Colorado blade helps draw the fish in, and they're actually able to target that orange or red kicker blade and eat that spinnerbait. So again, same places I'd like to fish this are exactly the same as a jig. Depends on what the bass are kind of mood they're in that day. I've noticed some days they'll eat a black and blue jig better than they will a spinnerbait. I've seen days where they eat a spinnerbait better than they do a black and blue jig. But rocky banks, lay downs, cover, just anywhere you can really get that spinnerbait in, tight to that cover so those fish can actually find it and eat it. Alright guys, so we have been snowed in, or I should say iced in, for probably going on a week now. Here in East Tennessee we've actually got a lot of snowfall, sub-zero temperatures and everything, so it's been kind of hard to get out, let alone pull a boat and everything. There's not, I mean, a lot of our lakes are starting to freeze over in the coves and stuff where you put your boats in, so you can't really go fishing unless you want to scratch your boat or if you got an aluminum boat. But that's all I have for you guys. I hope you guys learned a little bit of something. If you did, please smash the thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, catch 'em big.